Hello everyone, I'm Naveen Agarwal and I want to welcome all of you once again to my weekly video update. Now recently we have been talking about COVID-19 vaccines and the vaccination program in the United States. And on that we have kind of a good news, bad news story, right? The good news is that we have 2 vaccines now authorized for emergency use, and as a result we have been able to start vaccinating people. But the bad news is not going fast enough. As of January 15th, according to the CDC, only about 12 million people have received the first dose of one of these 2 vaccines. So we have a long way to go. And that is why we need not only a stable supply of these 2 vaccines to keep coming in, but we also need new vaccines, different vaccines from different manufacturers, so we can have more options and we can vaccinate as many people as quickly as possible. So on that front, there's some emerging positive news. There was an article published in the New England Journal of Medicine recently about a vaccine candidate from Johnson & Johnson. And there's a lot of anticipation building about that vaccine because Johnson & Johnson has a very strong history and a track record of successful vaccines. So people are really hoping and waiting for this particular vaccine candidates to get emergency use authorization by the US FDA. So I want to talk about those interim results, which is showing a lot of promise, especially because there is a good chance that we may need only 1 dose instead of the 2 doses required from these 2 vaccines that are out there right now. So that could be a great possibility. But I also want to talk about in what way this particular vaccine is different from the 2 mRNA vaccines that are already out there. And as a result, what advantages we can have. So let's get into that. First, let's talk about the differences. This particular vaccine is not an mRNA vaccine. It is based on what they call a viral vector. And in this case, they have selected the adenovirus, which is a commonly occurring virus, and it gives us common cold, not the intense cold or flu that you get, but with mild symptoms, and it happens all the time. So they have used this adenovirus, and the reason they call it a vector is because it carries a different genetic code than its original genetic code. So that's where genetic engineering comes in. They remove the existing DNA and they introduce a DNA with a code to achieve a specific objective. And in this case, the specific objective is to stimulate the production of the spike protein. Same thing that mRNA vaccine is trying to do. But in this case, it is done through DNA, not through mRNA. And as a result, the DNA has to actually go inside the nucleus of our cells. So you may ask, hey, isn't that risky? Isn't that going to mess up our own DNA and create some kind of genetic defects? The answer is a no. It has already been proven because the viral particle in this case is not able to replicate itself at all. It works only once and once only. Each particle works only once because the DNA code is designed in a way that it cannot replicate itself. What it does, it stimulates the production of the mRNA, which will have the code for the production of the spike protein. So it's a little bit one step behind than the mRNA vaccines. mRNA vaccines work more directly. This works a little bit one step behind. So what's the advantage? Well, the advantage is that, first of all, it has already been proven as a vaccine. Especially from J&J, they produced the Ebola vaccine using the same viral vector, and that was approved by the European Medical Agency. They also tried this in vaccine candidates for HIV and Zika virus with pretty good results. And as a result, they have a lot of experience with this particular technology. Manufacturing technology is fairly mature. And as we speak, they are already building the supply of this vaccine. So it works. It has been shown to work, and the manufacturing supply can be expected to be more reliable in this particular case. But the biggest advantage is that because it's DNA, it is more stable at normal refrigeration temperatures. So it doesn't require the ultra cold -25, -75 degrees centigrade freezing temperatures that the other mRNA vaccines require. because mRNA is a lot more unstable than DNA. So we can actually store this as at normal refrigeration temperatures and be able to distribute broadly in remote areas where the refrigeration may not be available. And that's a big advantage because it can go everywhere in the world, even in developing world or other countries. And sure enough, the similar technology actually has been tried by AstraZeneca, and that particular vaccine has already received emergency use authorization in UK, India, and Mexico. So we should be able to vaccinate more people across the world than just using mRNA vaccines. And that's a great advantage. Okay, so now let's dig into some of the interim results and why they are looking very promising. So first of all, these are only interim results. The longer term results from phase 3 trials are still pending and they should be coming soon. That's where the key question of efficacy will be answered. In this particular case, they have produced data that gives us confidence that this will work because they have produced data on select a few patients from their phase 2 trials, and it is showing that they are able to generate antibodies in their system, both binding antibodies to the SARS-CoV-2 virus and also neutralizing antibodies, and in fair amount of concentration. So that's positive news and showing us that the immune system is able to respond without too many side effects. Now, just a quick note on side effects, that they studied that, and they are typical side effects of low to moderate severity, injection site pain that have been reported by other vaccines, or maybe fatigue, headaches, or muscle pain, or maybe some fever, but nothing extreme. So these are all kind of expected side effects that we can expect from any one of these vaccine candidates. So as far as the results are concerned, let me first describe the study that they are reporting the results from. So they had two cohorts of vaccine patients. One cohort was 18 to 55 years old. The other one was more than 65 years old. And they tracked them separately. And they had about roughly 400 patients in both of these. And again, as I mentioned, they are still monitoring the longer term data, and they'll be reporting that pretty soon. So in both of these, and again, they divided the vaccination regimen several ways. They studied 2 doses, and they studied a low dose and a high dose. And the way they did that was they had a group which received placebo and placebo only. Dose 1 placebo, dose 2 placebo. The second group received a low dose and a low dose. A third group received a low dose and a placebo. A fourth group received a high dose and a high dose. And a fifth group received a high dose and a placebo. So look, their study is pretty sophisticated. They are going to study the effect of 2 doses and the effect of concentration and the amount of dose in both of these cohorts. So it's a pretty sophisticated study designed that way. And what they are reporting, very, very importantly, is that 90% of the candidates who received these vaccine dosages, they were 90% seropositive, meaning like they had antibodies in their system even after the first dose within 29 days. Within about a month of the first dose, they were able to have antibodies in their system, 90%. And nearly 100% had antibodies close to about 50 days. And after receiving the second dose, there was an enormous boost in the level of antibodies. And exact numbers you can find in the article, and I'll give you a link to that article. But big picture, 90% of the people who received even the first dose had antibodies. 100% of them had antibodies by day 50, around day 50. And they were stable up to 70 days. And a second dose boosted the level of antibodies significantly. Now, let me emphasize one point, that binding antibodies, which is what you might measure from an assay like ELISA, is not the same as neutralizing antibodies. For that, you do a neutralization assay. And they did both. And they are showing a very strong correlation between the binding antibodies and the neutralizing antibodies. Very, very strong correlation. It seems to have a little bit more variability for the older age cohort, but nevertheless, there is a correlation. So the idea is that if you have antibodies in the system, you also have a fair amount of neutralizing antibodies, which is exactly what will prevent the virus, the actual virus when we are infected, from infecting our cells and then multiplying in our system. So that's extremely good news. It basically shows that the vaccine works. It's able to generate the immune response in terms of antibodies. And I didn't focus too much, but it also generates a T-cell mediated response, which is what people look for in these vaccines. So it works. It has expected side effects and not of high severity. So safety and efficacy is expected to be pretty good. And all chances are that it should receive the FDA emergency use authorization within a month or so. That's the expectation. And hopefully we will be able to increase the supply of this vaccine. Now, I talked about 1 dose versus 2 dose. It has not been decided yet. However, there is a possibility that for some people in some age group, 1 dose may be enough. For some other people, they may still require 2 doses. And that data we will see when the longer term phase 3 trial data is presented. So to summarize, key difference, this is an adenovirus-based vaccine, not an mRNA vaccine. And as a result, it can be stored at normal refrigeration temperatures. It's based on technology which is fairly mature and can be scaled very rapidly. And then it is showing very high promise with the very low side effects or adverse effects of efficacy. Now, actual efficacy we will know when the data is published. So I hope this is useful to you and you find these videos informative and actionable. And that's my intent. My intent is to give you information at a slightly deeper level so you can be aware and make informed decisions about the health and safety of your family and yourself. I hope all of you are staying safe in these very difficult circumstances. Let me know what's on your mind. Leave a comment or engage with me on LinkedIn. I love to hear from you.